I try to connect the league with our speakers. And today was so very easy to do because the League of Women Voters policy, one of our issue policies is that congressional districts and government legislative bodies should be apportioned substantially on population. We oppose partisan and racial gerrymandering that strips the rights of voters. It takes away the equal voting rights of all eligible voters. And the League, from the national on down, works in states across the country to pass ballot initiatives to institute independent restructuring commissions. So I think we're right on target with exactly where we need to be. Today, our speakers are Leigh Morris and Ranjan Rohatgi. Yes. Anyway, they are our District 2 Republican and Democrat members of the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission of Indiana, the ICRC. And Ranjan teaches at St. Mary's. He teaches in the Department of Mathematics and Computer Science. He received the Donald and Nora Berry Fisher Award for Teaching Excellence in 2020. He's affiliated with the Institute of Mathematics and Democracy. He has taught classes and studied on gerrymandering from a mathematical point of view. He got his BA in mathematics from Northwestern and a PhD in mathematics from IU in Bloomington. And wave your hand so we know who you are. There you go. And Leigh Morris received his bachelor's from Ball State, his master's in healthcare administration from the University of Minnesota. He has his career path included 30 years as a hospital executive and service as a mayor of La Porte, after which he had several key positions for the state of Indiana. He was named a Sagamore of the Wabash by Governor O'Bannon in 1999 and received the Governor's Distinguished Service Medal from Governor Daniels in 2012. He's the former chair of the LaPorte County Republican Party. And I am going to let the two of them now take over and do their thing and tell us where they've been and where they're going and how we can help. And thank you both for being here.
Well, what a joy to have the opportunity to be with you today and to share with you some insights about the work that the, oh goodness, where did there it goes. Indiana Redistricting, Citizens Redistricting Commission is doing. Get my technology corrected. There we go. This is a bit of an overview, and I'm so pleased to have the opportunity to partner with Ranjan in sharing with you today. As indicated, I'm a Republican member of this commission, and Ranjan is a Democrat member of this commission, but you would never know it because we are totally nonpartisan in our approach to trying to advocate for fair and equitable redistricting. And it is not a matter of a political affiliation. It is a matter of trying to do the things that are necessary to bring about changes in our redistricting approach. The coalition has 9 members, 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, 3 that were neither Republican nor Democrat, and then we have 3 alternates, just in case some of us are not in a position to be able to serve. The legislation, the organization of the commission was modeled after the Ruckelshaus legislation. Our purpose is to demonstrate how multi-partisan and a diverse group with no interest in the outcome can create maps that better serve voters and communities. Who's in right now? Redistricting reform is important from many different standpoints. We need to know who is in charge of the redistricting process. I'd like to be able to get this reduced so I can, there we can all see the screen better. there's a conflict of interest for lawmakers. It is clearly the responsibility of the Indiana General Assembly, but there's a conflict when the political figures who benefit from decisions made about redistricting are drawing up the districts on their own. The fact that it is being done that way has been causing problems for many, many years, and I'll show you just a little bit later, but it's clearly the responsibility of the General Assembly to do that. Redistricting, we believe that it needs to be done in a very transparent way. We need to know what the criteria are, what the priorities are, and what data is being used in order to do that redistricting. And we believe public participation is an essential ingredient in the process of getting to fair and equitable redistricting. We believe that you can have redistricting on an independent basis. That doesn't mean it's apolitical. We believe that it's important to have diversity and representation in drawing maps that are representative of all voters. Now, there are some criteria that are required by state or federal law. Equal population is a requirement for congressional districts. They have to be as equal as possible. There has to be more variation is allowed for state and legislative districts, but the General Assembly has applied a similar standard for both. So you got to comply with the law. Secondly, comply with the Voter Rights Act. And third, the districts need to be contiguous. Desired, but not required, is incumbent blind. In other words, don't pay attention to who's already in the office when you're drawing the districts for the future. And the districts need to be compact. There's another one that we'd like to see given more consideration. That's something called communities of interest. And a community of interest is a group of people that are concentrated in a geographic area who share similar interests and priorities. There's some that are obvious. A city or a town or a township or a county, a school district. Others aren't so obvious. The Amish community might be considered a good example of a community of interest. Minority neighborhoods, regional industry concentrations, and how communities are treated for purposes of redistricting is important. Are they considered as a whole or are they split? We have small communities in this state right now, for example, that are divided into as many as 6 different legislative districts. That's something we really need to work on. Gerrymandering is something that is somewhat difficult to explain, but when you see it graphically, sometimes it helps really. Let's take these examples here. On the left, this is what might be considered the population mix in a district that's being drawn. You've got 60% blue and 40% red. Well, you can draw for that map so it provides perfect representation. You have 3 blue districts and 2 red districts, and blue wins because they're the largest component of that district. There's another way you could do it that would be very compact but unfair. You end up with 5 blue districts and 0 red districts. Well, blue wins, but they win it all in this case because it's been drawn to favor them clearly. And then you can do others that are neither compact nor fair. In this case, you'd see the lines drawn, and you can look at Indiana's map, and it looks something like this. You end up with 2 blue districts and 3 red districts, and red wins. So this is a way to look at gerrymandering, and what we would like to move for is this perfect representation to the extent that we can achieve it. There are some case studies that will show what this looks like. This is a map. The large red area in this map is a rural area around Indianapolis. Indianapolis is on the far left, but when they drew this district, they also drew an appendage moving from that rural area into Indianapolis in a densely populated area, which then causes the rural area, which is the largest component of this district, to lack actual representation. Their representative is in this little appendage here and is really accountable to the heavy population concentration here in many ways, so that the rest of the district feels they're kind of left out in that process. A tale of 2 districts in 2001 and 2011, for example, our own congressional district. In 2001 to 2011, it was a very competitive district. But in 2011 to 2021, it hasn't been competitive since 2012. Well, what is the motivating factor? Did the voters change? Not really. Was it the district lines? It clearly was. And if you look at how congressional districts have been drawn over the decades, you can see how they've been moved around to favor a candidate or favor a political party, as the case may be. Our own congressional district was, this at one time was Congressional District 3. This is the 1980s, the 1990s. 2000, it was reconfigured as Congressional District 2. And then 2010, the lines were changed again. So gerrymandering provides an opportunity for moving district lines around to favor one party or another, or one set of candidates or another. The Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission has 4 priorities that we think are really important. Number 1, draw districts that encourage competitive elections. We had public hearings in all 9 congressional districts in Indiana. We had almost 800 people participate in those hearings, and we heard over and over how important it is to structure districts so that there's even competition available in that district, so that it isn't a foregone conclusion who's going to win. And we believe that's a really important thing. Looking at the 2020 elections, Republicans gained 57% of the votes in our Indiana General Assembly elections, but they secured 78% of the seats, while Democrats got 42% of the vote and only got 22% of the seats. That's not what you call encouraging competition. And 8 of our 9 congressional districts in Indiana were decided by heavy margins for Republicans by 16 votes, 16 percentage points. So there really wasn't any competition. Clearly, I'm a Republican, so I like to see Republicans get elected, but I believe that competition creates a much better situation. It also encourages participation in elections. You know, Indiana has been as low as 50th out of 50 states in voter turnouts. That was 2014. We got a little bit better in this past election. We're now 42nd out of 50 states in terms of voter participation. And it's that lack of competition that we believe discourages voter participation. So first of all, encourage competitive elections. Second, keep communities of interest together to the extent you can. Don't combine clashing communities of interest in the same district. Third, divide cities and counties into as few districts as possible. One of the really memorable discussions in the public hearings was from a school district that had 4 different legislative districts that it served, and nobody was really representing them. There was no voice that they felt they had in the legislative process. So number 4, create a transparent process that gives the public real opportunities to participate in the process. Now, we're going to have a map drawing opportunity in Indiana. The commission's sponsoring that competition, and the maps that best fulfill the criteria established through our public testimony and endorsed by the commission will be awarded cash prizes. And then we'll submit those maps to the Indiana General Assembly with a recommendation that the legislature adopt them instead of drawing maps that protect partisan interests. And everybody's going to have an opportunity to use that software. It's available. More information, go to the League of Women Voters of Indiana website, which is on your screen right now. And you can access that software and see how it works. Try your hand at it. It will, hopefully, we'll end up being able to help the Indiana General Assembly make that decision to draw maps that don't protect partisan interests. Now, here's some things that we hope that you can do, that we want to make sure gets done in Indiana, quite frankly. Let the public know well in advance when the General Assembly will return for redistricting. I've got more information for you on that in a moment. Second, we hope that the General Assembly will conduct public hearings in each congressional district before the maps are drafted and then again after the legislative proposals become public. We believe it's important to provide adequate time for people to study those proposals and provide feedback. And 30 days, in our opinion, would be what's desirable. And fourth, provide public access to a mapping website and the ability to draw maps to submit them for consideration to the House and Senate Elections Committee. Now, time is of the essence because just yesterday, it was announced by House Speaker Todd Houston and the Senate President Pro Tem Roderick Bray that they're planning to complete the new congressional, state house, and state senate districts by October 1st. They're not going to wait for the final census information. They're going to use so-called legacy data from the U.S. Census Bureau that will become available in mid-August. Once that's received, the House and Senate election committees are going to hold public hearings, hopefully in early August, weeks before the proposed new maps are released. The dates, the numbers, location of the hearings have not been determined yet. And the process then to draft the legislation determining the district boundaries will originate in the House. The legislation would move through the House the week of September 20 and through the Senate the following week. And it's really unclear at this point how far in advance of September 20th, if at all, the maps will be available for public review. So this is both positive and concerning. Number one, that we have a plan, at least now, how the General Assembly plans to proceed. And number two, that we now have an opportunity to influence. And your role becomes really important now because it's time for action and involvement. And we hope that you'll learn all you can about redistricting and the approach that's being taken by our legislature. Then secondly, let your legislators know that you expect redistricting to be fair and equitable rather than favoring partisan interests. And we recently had a little effort sponsored by the commission to communicate that message to the Indiana General Assembly, members who were involved in the process. And it was rewarding, I think, that we had so many people expressing their concern. That was the thing that was amazing to me during our public hearing process, how well informed so many people are about redistricting, how great their understanding is of the gerrymandering that's been done in Indiana, and the passion that they feel about getting changes so that that redistricting is fair and equitable rather than favoring partisan interests. And I hope that we can all seek to be partners with our legislators in making sure that our 2020 redistricting process is transparent, gives the public real opportunities to participate, draws districts that encourage competitive elections, keeps communities of interest together, and avoids dividing cities and counties. So that's my message to you, and I would be happy now if there are some questions that we'll have the opportunity to participate. And Ranjan takes it from here.
All right. So I'm going to give a little bit of background about our mapping competition here in a second. I'll share my screen and show kind of how that software works and how you can all get involved in doing that. But if there are a few questions, we can take those now, and then of course we can take some after I go as well.
We need a sign. Can you explain how to make a district competitive for candidates while not including the COIs of opposite views? COIs.
Well, that is a real challenge. And there's probably no way to make redistricting absolutely fair and equitable from every perspective. So what you really strive for, in my opinion, is a balance. And so that you do not skew that redistricting in any particular direction. The legislature has really done a great job, I believe, of keeping districts compact. But in that process, they have maybe given too much emphasis to compactness and not enough emphasis to making sure that redistricting ends up with a pattern and a map that is fair and equitable to voters in that district. So getting the balance between those various factors, the communities of interest, the compactness, the contiguity, and the community and the competitiveness is a real challenge. And being able to use the software that Ranjan is going to talk with you about is a great tool to use in that process. And that's one of the things that's really changed about redistricting over the years. This is software and information that anybody can work with now to help define how you get the best balance.
Love you, honey.
Yeah, and I'll add to that.
Excuse me, first of all, if folks, would you please mute yourselves so that we can hear just our speakers, please? Thank you.
Thanks. I'll add to that in terms of communities of interest, I think the other thing that we need to focus on is getting the right level of representation. That is not splitting them up so much that their power is diluted, split up a community into several different districts so that they can't really have a critical mass to get power. But also, if a community is very large and you just choose, a community of interest is very large and you just pack them all into one district, then you're also diluting their voting power, right? Because then you're only giving them one district, whereas maybe that community is large enough to get more than just one district. And to Elizabeth's question, so her question is, I live in South Bend. Each member of the state house represents approximately 67,000 people. The population of South Bend is just over 100,000, but we currently have 3 representatives from South Bend in the legislature, plus 1 from Granger. And the question is, would keeping cities together reduce our representation as a city? And what would you say to folks like me who live in South Bend? Yeah, so this is a great question. And I think Leigh's example of he had State District 28 shown on there, where it was a large rural area, and then they had tacked on a little bit of the city of Indianapolis. Having districts that are, solely urban or solely rural, is having all of the districts be like that is simply not practicable. I mean, just looking at the numbers here, right? If each state house district has 67,000 people, well, South Bend then should get more than 1, but less than 2. So there's going to be some mixture in there. The idea is, and maybe this isn't a satisfying answer, but the idea is that if the elections can be competitive in some sense, if people feel like they have a voice, even if their candidate doesn't win, then it doesn't matter whether the representative in your district is from South Bend or from some other part of St. Joe County or even from another county, as long as they're kind of amenable to hearing what you have to say. I think what we heard in the public hearings a lot was, well, we heard some folks say that they felt that even representatives from other parties now are much less responsive to what they have to say than they were 10, 20, 30 years ago, right? So the being in the city particular versus not being in the city I don't think is as big of an issue as having responsive representatives, but responsive representatives will hopefully be more of a consequence from a fair redistricting process. Leigh, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
I think that covers it well. South Bend situation is very different. Bloomington has 6 different legislators that are supposedly representing parts of Bloomington. So they don't really have a voice, in their opinion, in the General Assembly, because the interests of those many legislators are so widespread that Bloomington's interests kind of get lost in the process. So that's an example of why one formula doesn't work in every situation. And that's a balance that you try to get to.
All right, let me jump in here briefly and share how this software works for a few minutes. And then, of course, we can keep going with questions during or after that. Okay. All right, so before we get to the redistricting software, Leigh already showed you the current congressional districts in Indiana. He showed you this map. If we're in South Bend, then we're up here in the 2nd district. But of course, we also have the state Senate. There are 50 state Senate seats, and each state Senate seat has about 135,000 people. And you can see South Bend is in one, but there are, even Roseland or other parts of the county that are South Bend, but maybe not in city limits, are in other districts. So that's these are the state Senate seats around us, and then the state House. As Elizabeth said in the chat, each state House representative represents about 67,000 people, and so by necessity, South Bend will be split into at least 2 different districts, and you can see kind of that it's more than 2 here, right? So we have the 6th over here, the 8th is up here. There's a handful of them in the area, and so when it comes to gerrymandering, Leigh was absolutely right. We do not have proportional representation either in DC. If you look at these 9 districts, right, 7 of the 9 are Republican, whereas about 40 to 42% of the voters vote for Democratic candidates. But this is also true on the state House and state Senate level. In the state Senate, there are 39 out of 50 are Republican, and in the state Senate, 71 out of 100 are Republican. So when the General Assembly makes maps towards the end of the year here with that timeline that they just explained, they're going to be creating 3 new maps: one for the congressional representation in DC, and then one for the state House and one for the state Senate. And so the ICRC, as Leigh mentioned, we are hosting this map drawing competition. So the commission itself, we are not drawing maps. We are hosting a map drawing competition. We are taking submissions from Hoosiers for what the map should be for all 3 of the different maps. And the best ones, according to the commission, according to the public testimony that we heard, we will present those to the legislature, and the people who drew those will win cash prizes. And so the software that we're using is, you can access it through this website. I'll put the URL in the chat here when we're done, but it's districter.org/Indiana. And if you do that, you get to this page. And you'll notice at the very top, there's 2 options. You can draw districts or you can draw communities. We're going to talk about both of them, but I want to start with drawing districts, right? These are the maps that we want you to submit to us and for our competition. And you'll notice there are 3 options. You can draw congressional districts, you can draw state Senate districts, and you can draw state House districts. You can draw any of those 3. So let's pretend that we want to build a map for the state House districts. The software works the same way in all 3 cases, but let's just go and look at this one. Okay, so when you click this, you'll notice a few things. So first, we have this map of Indiana here with cut up into all these little areas, which I'll explain in a second, and also a bunch of tools here on the right side. Okay. So I'm going to zoom in. Let's just suppose we're going to start drawing these districts in the South Bend, the greater South Bend area here. So I can zoom in by double clicking or by pressing the plus sign. And here I am in South Bend. Okay. Right. And if I want to move the map around, I can just click and drag in any direction that I want to go. All right. So, and notice I picked state House. So we're going to need to draw 100 different districts that cover the whole state. We're not going to do those here. I'm just going to show you how you can do this. All right. So as I've been moving and zooming in and out, you've noticed that this hand icon has been clicked. If I actually want to start drawing, then I need to go to the paintbrush. I click the paintbrush, and you'll see a couple options here: the brush size, the color. You'll see a few other options. We don't need to make the brush size smaller. It depends on how zoomed in or not we are. So let's zoom in a little bit more. And now you see, I'm not even clicking anything, as I just move my mouse around, these different precincts, they get bolded in gray here. And so if I want to draw a district, I just start clicking. Okay, so let's pretend I just want to draw a district. All right, so let's zoom out. Okay, I want to go all the way from the Michigan border, and I want to just work my way south here. maybe this is what I want to do. Maybe this is not what you want to do, and that's just fine. I'm just showing an example here. Okay, and Leigh said my district had to be contiguous, so let's make sure that is the case for sure. But you'll notice at this point, down here on the right side, I'm already past 65,000, right? But this is all based on 2010 census data, so this will change. Once we get the new data in August, then that's the data that we want to use. That data will be in on the website, and that's the data that we want to use to draw the maps for the competition. And like Liz said, then every district should have about 67,000 people here. But based on the 2010 census data, each district should have 64,000 and change. And so this district is kind of too big. So now maybe I need to erase some areas. So I click on this eraser, and let's get rid of some of these precincts here until we're down to whatever size it is that we want to be at. Okay, and so maybe now I've drawn my first district. Okay, now I want to draw some more districts. Well, then I get a new color and I can start painting again. So here's another district. And now you see it shows me how many people are in this one down here as well. Right, and I again want to get this approximately to 65,000-ish. And that's how you make districts. That's how you draw them. So ideally, we will have several submissions from people all around the state that have the entire state painted with all of the districts, all of the 100 state house districts. We'll have separate maps that are painted with 50 state senate districts. We'll have separate maps that are painted with 9 federal districts. And then again, we will pick the best ones. The commission will pick the best ones according to what we heard in the public testimony. Okay, now when I started drawing this, I just said, oh, let's just start at the border and let's just work our way down. That seems reasonable if you're just looking at, I just want districts that are nice shapes, nice and compact. But as Leigh said, that's not the only important thing that there is, right? And so what other information we also want are what the communities of interest are, right? We know that for the state house districts, South Bend will have to be split up. South Bend is just too big of a city. Well, how should we split it up? Right now, it's split up like this. Here's part of South Bend. Here's another part of South Bend. There's some more out here and some more out here. Is that how we want to do it? Well, if I'm going to draw maps, I really should know a little bit about the community. I should know what parts of South Bend should kind of stay together and maybe where it's okay to split it up. Now, there's not going to be a perfect way. Lines that are drawn are going to go through communities, are going to separate them. But we want to try to minimize, of course, splitting school districts, splitting counties, splitting cities, but also these other more amorphous communities, these communities of interest that Leigh had mentioned. So other types of maps that we want are communities of interest maps. These are not part of the competition, but if people draw these, if people show us what the important communities are in Indiana, then we can see how maps submitted by people do in terms of keeping these other communities together. And so if you want to draw a community, you can draw a community just out of precincts like we just did, or out of block groups. It doesn't really matter. Block groups are a little bit smaller, so you have a little bit more control over exactly how you're defining your community. But okay, let's draw a community of interest. Here, we don't need to cover the whole state. You just need to tell us what areas are important, what areas should remain together. So I'll give you one quick example because I think I've gone on for too long here. And then I will open it up again for questions. And I see that there's already some in the chat. So, for example, right, I zoomed in, I was on the hand, but now I want to start drawing the community. Perhaps one community of interest that we want to keep together is kind of this tri-campus area that includes St. Mary's, Holy Cross, Notre Dame, and the surrounding areas where lots of students live. Maybe that's someone's community. Maybe that's not your community. Maybe you don't think that they need to be together. But what we need to hear is we need to hear from all sorts of people about what their own communities are. And some, of course, will conflict with others. But okay, so I got my brush, and okay, I'm just going to color in all the areas that I think are part of this kind of tri-campus community area. And you'll notice that, maybe I don't really think this part out here is, but I do think this part over here is, and I can't really tell that because I'm drawing this out of these precincts. That's fine. So maybe I've mapped this community. Maybe I also want to map some other communities. But all right, so I've mapped this one. Let's give it a name. Let's call it Tri-Campus Community. And let's describe, the campuses of Notre Dame, St. Mary's, Holy Cross, and the surrounding areas. Okay, and now you've mapped a community of interest. You can map more than one community of interest on one map. I could, go and get another one. I could get another color, move over here. Maybe I have another community that I have over here that I want to draw, and I could draw that in a different color. And I could also give it another name. And then I could describe it down here. And that's another community of interest. Whether you're drawing communities or drawing maps, when you're completed, then you click save. And when you save it, you notice they give you a URL. That's like a link. So you can just copy that link. And now anyone who uses that exact link, anyone who you share that link with, they have a copy of either the districts that you've drawn or the communities that you've drawn. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for now. That was a brief tutorial. If you have questions, you are more than welcome to email me or contact me in some other way. I'm happy to help. And we will be making videos for how to use the software that will be much more detailed than what I've just given. Those should be coming out hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks. All right, so I think I'm done.
Okay.
And now we can take some questions.
I got to go back to where we were. Let's see. Some of these were just statement, just comments. But as far as questions, Joe Broden, is there a list of legislators and county chairs from both parties, quote, on the record as committed to the specific goals as you've outlined for the fair districting process?
That is a very important question, but one that's very difficult to answer with certainty. I've had many conversations with individual legislators that tell me they really favor fair and equitable redistricting. But number one, they said, we don't hear any groundswell of support from the general public, so we're not going to go out on a limb on this sort of thing unless we know this is something the voters really want. Well, we're beginning to get that public outcry as a result of the ICRC's work. So that excuse is going to maybe go by the wayside. The other one, though, that's more difficult to deal with is the discipline of the party caucus within the legislature. And it's very difficult for an individual legislator to go against the party caucus if they expect to continue to be in the legislature and have any role to play. So we've got to give our legislators more courage, I think. And that's why the involvement and communication from folks like you are so important, to give those legislators comfort that if they go out on the limb, we're going to be out there with them. We're going to be supporting them. We're going to be encouraging other people to support them. So I know that there is support within the current General Assembly for fair and equitable redistricting. But our role is going to be to give them the political cover, if you will, to go out on the limb and really support it vocally and with their votes within the legislature. That's the best I can do. Ranjan, any different feeling?
No, I think you hit it on the head. The Democratic representatives and senators that I've spoken with have said, we fully support what you're doing. But part of that is because the Republicans have supermajorities and the Democrats don't really have any power in this process. So they've kind of jumped onto our bandwagon. Republicans that I've spoken with seem interested in the process, but I think Leigh's answer kind of hit the nail on the head. They're a little bit reserved about publicly saying anything. But in theory, in general, they kind of agree with the process, but are not committing to going with whatever maps we propose.
Okay. Okay.
This is probably a good place to say that this issue is not a Republican issue or a Democrat issue. When Democrats have been in power in the past, the gerrymandering has been just as bad as it is when the Republicans are in office. So if there's blame to go around, it's a bipartisan blame. But the opportunity is also bipartisan now to do something about it.
Okay, thank you. How useful or accurate is the legacy data that the IGA committee is planning on using? And are they using that data set just for meetings with citizens or for drawing the new districts?
That data is pretty accurate in terms for when it comes to the redistricting process, in the sense that the census asked a lot of questions, more than just where do you live, to figure out how many people are there. So the legacy data, it's not that they're using data that's old. It's just that they're using that, just that all of the census information has not yet been given to the states as of, when they get it in August. So legacy data will come in August. It won't have all of the data from the census, but it will have enough to be able to know kind of how many people live where and to draw districts. So if there are any changes that need to be made when the full census data is released, they will not be large. So that data, there's no worry in terms of, are we going to have a big change after they come out with those maps, because the full data will show something different? Highly unlikely.
Okay. Is the GA an outlier with regard to other states in jumping the actual census data counts? And are there specific concerns identified with the historical census data that they're planning to use?
No, they're not an outlier. I mean, right. So the pandemic delayed the census data. Usually by this point, after the census, we'd already be done, because the census data would come out in April and redistricting would be done by the time the session ended in the spring. So this is really just a function of the pandemic delaying the census.
Okay. Has the commission reached out to redistricting expert nationwide to encourage them to participate in the competition using public data plus summary data from the forums provided by your commission? And are such experts lined up to immediately study and as quickly as possible comment on the maps the legislature draws after applying various, this is a long question, this is several questions, after applying various mathematical tests to detect partisan gerrymandering?
So so we have reached out to several experts nationwide. On the mathematical side of things, I personally know a fair number of them. And the website that we're using, the Districtor website, is actually, that's come out of the metric geometry and gerrymandering group in Tufts. So it's a nationwide website that lots of states are using. And Moon Duchin, who leads that group, Julia, who's the Common Cause Policy Director, has been in touch with her. I know her. There are also, to your second point, so we have been in touch with those experts, and there are websites where, for the life of me, I can't remember what the website is right now, where you can essentially enter a shapefile that is the proposed districts, and it will tell you, it will spit out all of the relevant like mathematical metrics to measure how that map does. So there, and also, there are people lined up who are going to do this for all 50 states immediately as they come out. And when I say 50, I really mean the 43 that it matters for, right when this comes out, when each state comes out with these in the fall. So we have all the right people. We have a lot of people that we're in contact with, and we're going to be doing the right things. But if you have, I know you have a lot of connections. So if there are other names in particular that any of you think we should be speaking with, let us know. Hopefully we are already speaking with them, but if not, we would love to.
Okay. And Elizabeth Benyon did make a point about knowing people. She said, great point, Joe Broden. Everybody involved in the formal process should be, quote, on record, talking about what criteria they're using. Beth Norris said, I am repeating my question. What is the impact on the math of the accuracy or lack of accuracy in the population living there? Those who immigrated to both areas from Mexico or Central or South America countries may not be counted.
Yeah, sorry we missed this the first time, Beth. Issues of the accuracy of the census are not under, this is an unfortunate situation. I'm not an expert on how accurate otherwise is. I've not read up on how accurate otherwise the census has been. I'm aware of all the concerns about it as it happened last year. But yeah, it's the census. The census data is what has to be used in this process. And so if it's not accurate, it's not accurate. Now, there are a lot of people who are very smart working at the Census Bureau. And so I'm hoping that all these kinds of things will be taken into account. But yeah. Leigh?
It's what we have. We have to work with it, and again, reinforce how important accurate census data is the next time we have the opportunity to do this, which unfortunately is another 9 years away. But what we have is what we have to work with. No choice.
Okay, here's another one. Oh, that's just it's time we have better representation. Oh, then they need Ranjan's contact. It's awfully convenient for legislators to claim they want fair and transparent redistricting when they never have to vote on it. Most of these, I think the rest of these are mostly comments. Does anyone have any further questions?
I guess I have a question or a request. As everybody who knows me knows, I am fond of bringing guest speakers and topics to the largest or the second largest, one of the oldest Rotary clubs in the state, the South Bend Rotary Club. I would love for you to have the opportunity to speak to our club. So I will be in touch with you after the meeting. I'll go through Ranjan since I have his email address written down. But I think it would be really wonderful for the members of the Rotary Club to be exposed to this because it's nonpartisan and we're a nonpartisan group.
I would be delighted to partner with Ranjan in that presentation as well.
Okay.
I am a Rotarian, by the way.
There is another question. Are there natural boundaries that matter when drawing the maps?
In Indiana, not so much. As long as they're contiguous, as long as each district is contiguous, we don't really have any. We just have to follow state. Like by law, the only thing we have to do is have them contiguous and be within the state.
So what you all want us to do is to draw some maps, to contact our legislators.
Yes.
Maybe put something in the newspaper.
Yes.
To the editor kind of thing.
Yes.
And what else?
Learn all you can. Encourage your neighbors to do all those good things as well.
Get a yard sign.
Yeah, and between 2016 and 2020, there have been 4 states now have redistricting commissions that actually have legal power that didn't last time. And so things are changing around the country. And so, when anyone learns about redistricting, almost anyone across the board, doesn't matter what their political identity is, people don't like unfairness. And when they learn what gerrymandering is and how it can be done, the vast majority of people do not support gerrymandering. And it's really an issue of getting the word out there and getting people to call their legislators. If you have time to draw communities of interest and draw maps and submit those, we would love them, but spread the word and call your legislators.
And that's really a dual thing that our commission is working on right now. Number one is to provide input and partner with the General Assembly to try to make redistricting now as fair and equitable as it can be, but also to demonstrate how an independent, nonpartisan, independent commission can do redistricting in a fair and equitable way, so that perhaps between now and 2030, we can adopt an independent redistricting commission to do it in Indiana. That, I think, is an important goal for us to work on. And there you would have another important role of influencing our legislators in that direction as well.
Okay, thank you. How about contacting the local election committees? Is that someplace that would be, it says, how about contacting local election committees? Please speak to that.
I can't really speak to how effective that would be throughout the area. In most cases, I haven't found much receptivity of party leadership to get engaged, but it won't hurt to try. It won't hurt to try. You remember too that redistricting happens on the local level after the state and congressional redistricting is done. So we passed a resolution this morning in our Better Government Study Group here in LaPorte County to try to influence our county commissioners and mayors of cities in the county to gain citizen input into the redistricting process at the local level. So that may well be something that your League of Women Voters might want to consider as well.
And following up on that, Elizabeth asked, can the mapping website be used to draw county and city districts? This is a question that I don't know the answer to because I don't know, right? So the state and federal districts are drawn, like when the General Assembly puts the maps out, they are drawn down to the precinct level. Maybe someone here knows more than I. When county and city districts are drawn, are they also drawn on the precinct level, or is there any finer or more coarser data that they use to make their maps? It all just depends on what areas they use, what kind of blocks they use to make up their maps. And if they use the same ones, then presumably you should be able to.
Well, at the county level, of course, you have county council districts that have to be defined, and the commissioners have three different commissioner districts that have to be defined. And then within the precincts at the city level, you have wards that have to be designed. So there's a whole series of decisions that have to be made once the state lines have been drawn.
Okay, and Elizabeth has been very busy here. She has another question. Are neighborhood associations being encouraged to meet together and work together with the mapping site to map their communities?
I am not familiar with a specific initiative in that regard, but I think, as usual, Elizabeth has come up with a very good suggestion, and I will see that it's included in our work process.
Okay, Elizabeth, how are you doing, Elizabeth? Yeah, you got another one? Okay. So other people are saying that that's neighborhood associations would be a good idea. So
Yeah, and also, I mean,
they can feel like they're being represented.
And if you don't want to use the software, if it's easy for you to just print out a map and draw on it where your neighborhood is, and you take a picture and email it to the commission, I mean, it's not hard. It's much easier for me to maybe put it into a map than it is for you if you don't want to learn how the software works. So that's just fine too.
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, I want to, for the whole league, I want to thank you both for speaking with us, for giving us all this wonderful information, for giving us something to do, like we don't have anything else to do. But like you all, you have nothing else to do either, I'm sure. But thank you for spending the time. Thank you for giving us this encouragement to help in the process. And it's been a wonderful hour. Thanks for your time.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. We appreciate it greatly.
Okay. And everybody else, next month on the second Friday, we will have another lunch with the league. I think we're going to call it something different than lunch one of these days because we're not eating lunch. We're just meeting. But okay. Thank you all. This is being recorded. So if folks want to listen to it again or get some information that's been put into the chat, I think we can do that. And people have reference for it later. Does anyone have a final something? Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone. It's sunny, nice. Bye.
Bye-bye.